The information and views expressed by our host or guests on the Unlock Potential podcast are their own, and not a substitute for professional medical or fitness advice. Always consult with qualified healthcare or fitness professionals before starting any new exercise program or making changes to your current routine.
When you pick up 20 pounds off the ground, you create a certain dose, you repair that dose, and 20 pounds repairs quicker, which means now you're capable of 40 pounds. You pick up 40 pounds in a workout, you create a certain dose, you repair from that dose. Now 40 pounds feels so easy because of how much extra tissue you have. You're capable of 60. 60 turns to 120. 120 turns to 240, and we work ourselves up over time.
Hello and welcome to Season 2 of Unlock Potential. I'm Brian Delaney. Our focus this season is fitness. I'll be joined by Dr. Duvall, who's going to guide us through his protocol for getting into your best shape so we can live our best lives and serve others well. Hello and welcome to Unlock Potential. Welcome back. Hope you've enjoyed the first 4 episodes of this season so far. We're here with you today for episode 5. And as you can see behind me, title, insult, inflammation, and resolution. And in these last few episodes, we've had conversations about the different elements of fitness. I really want to give people an opportunity to learn from you, just like I have had to be able to spend some concentrated time with you so that you can go into depth and detail and really start to draw out of people what's going to be necessary for them to get to that next level of usefulness without creating next level injuries or harm unnecessarily, right?
Exactly.
So you guys enjoy listening and learning from Corey. I know I have. I know you're going to get a ton out of it, and I'll be back soon enough. We've got some exciting things lined up for you, both on the YouTube channel, Spotify, and also on our Patreon. So don't forget to like and subscribe and join us as one of our many supporters on Patreon. We thank you so much for being with us. And from here, I'm going to leave you with Corey, and you guys have a great time.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you. Appreciate you, man.
See you, brother.
Yeah. And when do we ever shake hands? I saw you going for the high five. I'm telling you.
Man. Got to raise it up.
There we go.
All right. Thank you, Brian. As he discussed, today we're going to talk about insult, inflammation, and resolution. And so essentially we're going to learn how our body responds to what we do to it on a daily basis, how it goes through a breakdown and repair process so that we're more capable in the future. Inflammation and anti-inflammatory lifestyles are a hot button topic, but they need to be fully understood in order to make sure that we're more capable in the future, as opposed to blunting our growth and stopping our experience as a human. So today we're going to talk mostly about the physiology of how it responds normally. In the next episode, we're going to talk about how we actually experience that physically. And then we're going to get into some more exercise like we did last episode to learn, hey, how does flexibility and the way we apply it help this process along? So I want you to imagine these are microscopic images of all of the tissues of our body. So our skin, our muscles, our ligaments, our tendons, our cartilage, all the way down to our bones, our nerves, our blood vessels, our kidneys, our liver, our small intestine, our large intestine, all of the tissues of the body are basically in this format. Now, if a scientist were to look at this, they would likely say that it was a ligament or tendon, but the same essential properties occur through all the tissues. You can see these black lines right through here. These black lines are connective tissues. They are protein filaments that line up when we pull on our tissues. And so a healthy ligament and a healthy tendon will have all of these in parallel to each other. You'll see these green dots in here. These green dots are the cells of that tissue that produce the protein that then gets lined up in the right orientation. You can see in between those tissues, there are these orange squiggly lines. These orange squiggly lines are known as lymph vessels. These are what help us drain damaged tissue out of that area so it stays clean and clear. Down here at the bottom, this red represents blood flow. Blood flow brings healthy fluid into the area, healthy cells into the area, more energy into the area so that it can keep itself running and functioning very efficiently. When we are active in any way, whether that's sleeping and just rolling over, whether that's making our breakfast, whether that is getting up and starting our daily tasks, or engaging in some exercise like Brian did in the last episode, we're going to create some damage to this tissue. And when we talk about dosing ourselves with exercise appropriately, we literally mean dosing how much damage we create to our body in each session. If we do too much and we wipe this apart, we've created a major tear to the body. If we don't do enough, you'll see that we don't actually stimulate more growth for the future. So when we talk about dosing ourselves, we are literally meaning, hey, let's make sure we create some damage and not too much. Now, when that damage is created, our body has to start a repair process. And that repair process is known as inflammation. So you'll see here the change as the damage occurs. These brown squiggly lines are the black lines that got damaged and started to coil up in the area. So these are chunks that have broken off and are now kind of clogging the area here. You'll see these big purple dots. These are white blood cells that have made their way from the bloodstream into the area. The white blood cells' job are to take these big chunks of damage and make them really small. Make them so small that they actually fit in these lymph vessels. And so these big chunks, when given enough time, disintegrate into these tiny little bits. And so those white blood cells are taking on that process. You'll also see that there are some little pink dots in here. These pink dots represent salt, and salt pulls water out of the bloodstream in order to fill this whole thing up with water. Because how do we wash away damage? We do it with a lot of water. If we had spilled something on the floor and had nothing else to wipe it up with, we would just be pushing the dust and dirt around. But if we wash it by providing a lot of water to the area and then sweeping it out of the way, we're left with fresh, clean floor after we've spilled on it. And so we've got this appropriate dosage of inflammation in the area. We're working to digest down these tiny little pieces. So the big chunks get digested down into tiny little pieces, and then we need to move it into the lymph system here. The way this happens is not passively. We can't just leave this tissue alone, and because otherwise it'll just stay there. What we need to do is we literally need to wring the tissue out, because our lymph vessels are open-ended tubes with one-way valves. So when I take and I move my body gently, I squeeze that inflammation. I squeeze those white blood cells, those big chunks that have been digested down, the water and the salt. I squeeze them and I dump them into the lymph system, and it gets swept out of the way. So if I just leave it and I don't move it, this whole system just stays and creates this gunky scab and scar in the area. But if I gently squeeze it while it's still fluid, that goes ahead and sweeps out of the way. Now these cells, these green cells, the ones that produce all of these extra black lines, they are stimulated while this inflammatory process is going on. And so the ones that are in the area get called back up to work. And so when we have inflammation there, we don't want to get rid of it faster than it should. We want it to be there to stimulate those cells to produce more black fibers so that we can lay down those fibers and be strong after we've broken it down. See up top here, we dosed ourselves appropriately, which meant that we left these fibers intact. We didn't break ourselves all the way across, we just broke a section of it. Well, it's really important, again, not to stop moving altogether, but to move ourselves gently. Because these white blood cells, while they do a really good job of breaking down these broken parts, if they're left alone and there's no movement, they'll actually work their way and create more damage. They don't know whether or not to leave this alone unless we use it. There's what's known as the piezoelectric effect, which essentially means when you use this tissue, that tissue sends a signal to the white blood cells, don't break us. And because these broken pieces can't get pulled on and moved that way, they don't create that signal to the white blood cells and they get broken down. So we create some damage here. We need normal inflammation and we need more movement in order to sweep the inflammation out. We need the stimulation to create new tissue, and we need the movement to prevent further breakdown of the tissue that's there. Now, as we work our way down, I want you to notice we've reached resolution of this insult. So we broke some tissue, we've gone through the full repair process, and you can see how many more black fibers are in the area here after resolution than there was at insult. You can see how many more of these green cells are in the area than up here before the insult. You can see how many more lymph vessels are in the area as opposed to before the insult. And that's because when we use our body with the right dose and we resolve, we're going to recover from the same dose faster next time. We're going to be able to recover so much quicker that we can handle a bigger dose next time. But if we don't go through this whole process, we just leave scabs and scars, we create more breakdown, and we don't respond by improving what we can do later. So quite literally, when you pick up 20 pounds off the ground, you create a certain dose, you repair that dose, and 20 pounds repairs quicker, which means now you're capable of 40 pounds. You pick up 40 pounds in a workout, you create a certain dose, you repair from that dose. Now 40 pounds feels so easy because of how much extra tissue you have, you're capable of 60. 60 turns to 120, 120 turns to 240, and we work ourselves up over time. So we want to dose ourselves with some insult. We want to go through that full inflammation process, and we want to resolve in order to be better the next time. I hope you enjoyed this episode where we learned about how to dose ourselves with exercise, how our body responds and repairs that process so we're capable of more in the future. In the next episode, we're going to talk about how we actually experience that as a human. What do the symptoms feel like as we're creating that dose? What do the symptoms feel like as we're going through that inflammation and repair process so that we can give ourselves the best dose and be better for everyone else in the future?
Check out the official Unlock Potential store where inspiration meets style. Explore our exclusive collection of gear inspired by the transformational messages straight from our Unlock Potential podcast. From trendy apparel that embraces the power of positivity to accessories that fuel your motivation. We've got something for every go-getter. Spread the messages of empowerment, energy, and motivation that you get from the Unlock Potential podcast by grabbing your gear today.
I think the first place people get off is they hear the word anti-inflammatory.
Okay.
And so they've been told, oh, take an anti-inflammatory. You're too inflamed. And anti-inflammatories don't create resolution. They stop the symptoms associated with this process and leave it to be repaired later. So as opposed to resolving inflammation, we just stop it and leave it for later. So imagine we're building an apartment complex. And as we're going through that building complex, we have a small fire, a little electrical fire, and it burns 4 or 5 of the apartments as we're building them.
Okay.
Well, we're going to notice that there's smoke in the area. We're going to notice that there's heat in the area. We're going to go in, we're going to put the fire out, and then we're going to go through the repair process. Well, anti-inflammatories basically stop the fire, but they don't go through the repair process.
Okay.
So they leave these burned out areas full of the water that they used, full of the fire extinguisher gunk that they used, and they leave it for later. So you go to move somebody into that house, into that apartment, and they're like, this place is a wreck. And so they start to complain about it. Well, that's what's happening when later on your symptoms come back after you've gone through anti-inflammatories.
Yeah.
And so how do we move through this? Well, we talked about in episode 5 that we need movement to let the inflammation move on through the lymph system, that if we don't move, it just stays in place and stalls. And so we need movement to get it out of the area, to make space for the new tissue. And we need the inflammation to be there to stimulate the cells to create the new fibers. So if we don't create it all together, or we leave it without moving, we're going to end up with gunk in the area.
Mm.
And then while the white blood cells come in here, these fibers that are still attached right next to the injury, if those white blood cells stay there and there's no tension or movement through the areas next to it, the white blood cells just keep working their way through.
Mm.
And they end up creating more and more tissue damage because they're not given the signal to stop.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Unlock Potential. For exclusive content, make sure to subscribe to our Patreon. Follow us across all socials at @TheBrianDelaney and visit our website at thebriandelaney.com to shop our gear and see what's coming up next.